We've got here a kit build Princeton reverb. I don't know the make of the kit. It's got a combination of manufacturer stuff. It's got a bunch of Sozo caps, got some MOD caps, parts all over the place, but in good ways, good parts. Hammond transformers, built-in sockets. The owner says for the previous owner, it just stopped working in the middle of a gig while playing full out, and that owner just gave it to the current owner, and the current owner wants me to make sure it's all working right. We'll get into the nitty-gritty inside. The first thing I want to do is just make sure that we have voltage everywhere we need to have voltage. Before I can do that, it's got a 2 amp fuse, 1 amp slow blow. So let's take out the 2 amp fuse and put in the proper 1 amp fuse. So if something is wrong, we'll lose a fuse, not a big chunk of the parts. All right, so I'm going to take the 6V6s here, some JJ 6V6Ss, and I'm going to give them a visual inspection. And I'm not seeing any discoloration, and I'm not seeing any flecks of metal on the inside of the glass. So these are probably okay. That doesn't mean that they are okay, but they're not obviously bad. I'll put these to the side. Got the JJ GZ34 in, TAD on this 12X7 and this 12X7, a JJ ECC81, and a Mullard CV4004, which is a 12X7 variant in V1. I'm going to power it up without the speaker connected, because right now it doesn't have any output tubes, so this is not an issue, and this shunts to ground anyway. And I'm going to go through and measure voltages, if everything's fine. I also checked the rectifier tube. It visually looks okay, but one of the most common failures of any amps like this are the current production rectifier tubes. So let's power it on with a light bulb limiter. Keep your eye on the bulb. We'll see if it starts to go bright as the rectifier warms up. Nope. So let's go through here and measure voltages at each of the preamp tubes and see where we're at. We're going to measure DC, and the black meter probe is going to chassis, which is ground. We're going to start with the filter cap, 429, 420, 347, 274. We're going to check the output tubes. So plate, 430, screen, 421, grid, -41, other grid, -41, other screen, 421, other plate, 440. That's all looking good in there. Now we'll do the phase inverter, well, the second triode of the phase inverter. The plate, 214, cathode, 626. Let's do this next plate and cathode. It's fluctuating because it's on the tremolo. Let me put a dummy plug in the vibrato jack so that I don't have that fluctuation while I'm measuring. All right, the plate is at 285, cathode is at 2.13. Next cathode, 1.9. Next cathode, 1.4. Plate, 187. Plate, 151. I'll call it plate for the reverb driver. 430. Cathode, 1.3, plate, 1.88, and then 190 for this plate, and the last cathode, 1.336. So each one of these seems to be working, and seems to be working just fine. Let me power it off and put the 6V6s in and connect it to a speaker. I'm getting everything else set. Let's get the treble and bass to noonish. Reverb and tremolo knobs off. Put these tubes in. It's possible they just had bad tubes or blew a fuse. I put in a 2 amp fuse, got some new tubes, I don't know. It's also possible that with these tubes in place, Since the tubes draw more current, that will reveal a problem. We'll find out in just a second. Connect to speaker. I'm still going through the light bulb limiter. Let's power it on, and I'll keep an eye on that. Hearing a slight hum. And I can hear my Wi-Fi router. Nothing seems too microphonic. Let's plug a guitar in and see where we're at. Treble pot doesn't do a lot. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, initial tests, okay. Let's talk about why this amp is not great. And I'll talk to the owner. He's pretty much given me carte blanche, but I don't want to abuse that carte blanche. I want to make sure he understands why I want to make the changes I want to make and why I think it'd be worth it to make them. But I don't know whether this amp failed with these tubes or if these are different tubes. I don't know if maybe they lost a speaker. I don't have the speaker that's with the amp. It's a Weber. That's possible. If they got an Alnico 20 watt or something, this could potentially take out one of those speakers. But there's just enough little things inside here that bother me from both the longevity point of view and in terms of things being optimal. Let's talk about that next. So overall, while the amp is built with stranded wire, it's all very stiff. These pots are all kind of wiggly because I took the hardware off so I could pull them to verify what I was measuring. I was measuring that these are linear taper pots, and they are indeed linear taper pots. These should all be audio taper. Specifically, this one and this one should be a J taper, or 30% taper. This one should be audio, or 10% taper. This is the bass, treble, volume. They're all linear, so it's not going to behave like a Princeton. You can get the same sounds, but you have very, very narrow sweet spots. This ground scheme is not optimal. I can leave it in place, but it's not my preference. It's got a bus wire running from there all the way down to here and from there to this input jack. It's much better to have that stuff made dedicated to the chassis, whether soldered to the chassis or to a ground lug. So if the input jack needs to be changed out, or fails for whatever reason, the amp doesn't stop working entirely, especially since you have two input jacks. But, this works, but it's just an inelegant way to do it. Like this bass pot here, this resistor is going to the bus wire. It's really stiff. If you need to change the pot, it becomes a problem. Same thing for down here where you can't see right now. Just a lot of inelegant stuff that doesn't really hurt anything, but why? It's so much easier to do it right. But these pots need to be changed out. All three of these picofarad value caps are just generic silver mica. They just say SM. And this treble cap here, I suspect might be having problems because there's not a lot of treble. Certainly not as much as this circuit should have. I suspect that might be the cause of that issue. We'll ignore the sloppy installation of these cathode resistors. Electronically, it does work. It's like having a daddy long legs inside your amp. It's not very pretty. I don't see why people do that. These blue Sozo caps are fine in terms of how they sound. They're fine caps, but they're just criminally large. much larger than the actual blue molded Ajaxes back in the day. And this one is much longer than the space between these eyelets, so it's kind of jammed in here. Interestingly, this one and this one match. This one's a lighter blue. Not only is this one a lighter blue, but it's installed backwards. The outer foil end with this line should be here at the plate voltage. This one's correct. They should both be matching. What can you do? That is a really ugly looking ground with all that ugly solder and discoloration on the chassis. I'm going to try to clean that up and make that more reliable. And I really don't like this rigid stretched wire from here on the cap to the ground lug. That's the ground for all the filter caps. That has a lot of strain on it, and it's all going this direction, and eventually it will just pull out of that solder because it's trying to. All its force is in this direction. I'll replace that, whether to here or to a new ground lug or whatever I do, with a looped wire, so there won't be any tension on it. Tension is bad. Down at this end of the amp, while technically everything is functional, it's just barely functional. When an amp looks neat here, it tells me that people took their time to do it right. When you have all this slop, I've got to go through here and double check every connection. This very important bias resistor is just floating up in space. The heater secondaries are going to this terminal strip and then wired to the lamp. Maybe they trimmed these too short. It's always good to eliminate solder connections that are extraneous. This is just an additional point of failure. I think this might reach, in which case I can replace that, but just shows that they weren't taking their time to do it right. Down here, you've got the ugly looking solder joint for the AC cable safety ground. The green ground wire is shorter than the white neutral and the black hot. I'm not going to move the camera to show you, but they're switching the neutral and they're fusing the hot. That's not safety code. That's not how these things should go. These wires are very, very stiff, and they're just tucked inside the pins on the tube socket. So they're held in place just by solder. It's not quite as bad on the longer ones, which have some slack, but these which are under pressure, that's not reliable. They will break. Here there's a splice on. Here's a red wire going to this plate, but it's yellow over here. They spliced it. How hard is it just to say, oops, I messed up, cut another length of red wire? At least get it all so there's not a point of failure hidden beneath this plastic. It's probably fine, but I don't know that. And if I send this amp out into the world, having done any other work, I've got to fix that too, just so I know that that won't come to bite me in the butt, even though it's something that the other guy did. They've got these very pointy sheet metal screws. That's a heater connection there, really close to that metal. That could arc. They should have done the loop the other way. It's really, and you can't see it. I can't really show it on the camera because the camera would have to be right where this pointer is, but there's some really ugly solder work down there. These heaters are just kind of held in place by miracles. So, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Technically, it works. It sure could sound a lot better, even if all I did was just change out all the pots for the right tapers. But I'd like to make it a little bit better than that and a little more reliable. I'll talk to the owner after he sees this video. For the same amount of effort, they could have gotten it right. For the same cost, they could have gotten it right. You have to care. That's the missing part. That's the piece that people just don't get. You have to care. Let's sigh. Thanks for watching.